We're finally here. It's been a long time coming. Week 1, Thursday night starts with Houston and Kansas City. I couldn't be more excited. We're going to take you through about 30 minutes of betting and fantasy advice. We're going to talk mostly betting here, but we've got a little regression candidates, some DFS Showdown, which wide receivers are going to blow up potentially for your DFS slate. So you want to stick around with us here. We're going to kick it right off, Mike and Eric, with Houston and Kansas City. Look at those two quarterbacks, probably two of the greatest young quarterbacks we've seen in a little while. But the spread is Kansas City favored by 9. So, Mike, is there enough of a difference between those two quarterbacks to warrant such a big spread?
I don't think it's a 9-point difference between those two quarterbacks. I think any given day, Deshaun Watson can play better than Patrick Mahomes. The difference in the 9.5 is the talent around them. You know, Texans trade away DeAndre Hopkins, replace it with Randall Cobb. They're trying to piece it together with a bunch of options for Deshaun Watson, not one guy for him to go to. But those weapons, they're not bad, but they do not compare to what Kansas City is bringing to the table. Elite level wide receivers in Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce at tight end. They just have too many weapons around Patrick Mahomes that the 9.5 to me is justified.
System quarterback for Mahomes is really what you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, you saw a 10-point spread last January in the playoffs. Now, when you come over here, you see DeAndre Hopkins. That's obviously contributing to the big number that it opened at 11, 10.5. But you're starting to see money in on Houston because home field advantage isn't exactly what we thought it was going to be going into the offseason. Now we're sitting at 9 here. I still think there's a little bit of value in Houston just because there's so much unknown. And when you look at Houston's sort of skill position players, yes, it doesn't compare to Kansas City, but you got the two Johnsons in the backfield. The two tight ends were pretty effective last year, and the receivers, I don't think any of them are bad receivers. So you put that all together. Bill O'Brien's a better offensive coach than he is a GM. I'm kind of a little bit positive on Houston here.
Yeah, so this line opened at like 11. It was 10.5. It was 10. Bought in at those numbers. And so now at 9, it feels it's tough to take Houston. The key matchup that I look at here is people overvaluing Kansas City based on what they saw in the playoffs versus Houston feeling like, oh, well, GM Bill O'Brien is bad, therefore Coach Bill O'Brien is going to be bad. And to me, that's just a narrative that I want to fade. So push comes to shove, I will also go with the Texans.
Yeah, I do think that is a big aspect of why that line is so big, is because the narrative for one team is Super Bowl champs, couldn't be riding any higher. They re-signed all their guys, we're going to roll it back. The narrative for the Texans is trade away our best player, sky is falling, what the heck's Bill O'Brien doing? So that is playing a big factor. But I do think the status quo aspect early on the season will be big. The fact that Kansas City is pretty much the same team that we saw win the Super Bowl last year is going to be big with the abbreviated offseason.
Yeah, you're seeing this, the psychology of the betting here with the big total as well, in that 54 range, open to 56. But you're sort of seeing from, like square bettors, this idea of, last season the Chiefs were down not only 24 on the scoreboard, but 34 against the spread. They come all the way back and not only win the football game, but cover the number, the overhits. Those are the types of things bettors like to see. And I think that's why you're seeing some inflated numbers here in week 1.
Yeah, the home field is interesting because they're going to have 17,000 fans in there. Some places will have 0. I know in our models, we have tamped down what we give for home field advantage, whereas in Vegas, at least initially, did not. So that'll be an interesting thing to watch. Let's do this. You seem like you're leaning Chiefs here. What's the key matchup for you?
The key matchup to me is the fact that the Texans brought back their entire secondary, except for safety, Sean Gibson. They brought in Eric Murray, who, former Chief, not that great, but not an upgrade, really, at the safety position. And their cornerback group was dreadful last year. Not a single one even had an average grade last season. They're just banking on the fact that these guys were former first and second rounders. Maybe this is the year they turn it on. I don't see that happening.
I see it on the other side of the ball. The Chiefs without Rashad Breeland, who's under a suspension. They have Antonio Hamilton, Rashad Fenton, the 6th-round pick a season ago, to go with Charvarius Ward, who has played well, but doesn't have a great pedigree. There's going to be a lot of pressure on the safeties, Juan Thornhill and Tyrann Mathieu, to deal with an underrated receiving core for Houston.
Yeah, I look at this and I just like Deshaun Watson having the freedom from DeAndre Hopkins, but still with explosive players at wide receiver, being able to attack down the field. He was so accurate there, the most accurate quarterback, 20-plus yards down the football field, and that's why I have to side with Deshaun. Let's look at props here. A prop that you like for this game, Mike.
I'm going to go with David Johnson, the new running back, under 49.5 yards.
Fading GM Bill O'Brien.
And it's because I just think you're going to be playing catch-up. And if you're going to be going head-to-head against Patrick Mahomes, you're not going to win that game by pounding the rock. I don't think that's where they're going to win. I think it's going to have to be through the air, so I don't see 49.5 him going over that.
Will Fuller, I think he's a popular fantasy pick this week.
Don't do this to me.
People love him. People like when
goodness.
he's healthy. They're a different team. Everybody will say his props at 63.5 for receiving yards. The Chiefs
He's going to get that on one catch.
are not the greatest defense in the world, but what they do is limit big plays, and so I don't see Fuller going over that number.
Yeah, they allowed just a 41 passer rating on deep throws last year. I'm here for the regression on that side. I am going under Sammy Watkins, 3.5 receptions, because
I can do that, Sammy.
This is about Mecole Hardman. He's going to break out in this game. He's going to solidify number 2 receiver status.
Anti-lizard, but we'll go with it.
Mecole Hardman is the guy I'm buying. Sammy Watkins under 3.5. I'm fading him. We'll be right back with some regression candidates with Eric and Ian Hartitz.
Well, with Texans Chiefs broken down here, we're going to come to the real reason why we're looking forward to this weekend, and it's fantasy football. And there's no one better than senior fantasy analyst Ian Hartitz, known Cordero Patterson truther. We're going to talk about regression, and regression is something that it's sort of a weird word, right? Because we always think of it as players getting worse, but oftentimes it's a player sort of going up to what we think that they should be doing. And Ian, you have a really good example of a player here in Robert Woods.
Yeah, happy week 1, everybody. And I do think Robert Woods fits that exact criteria because we have a good player that we've seen produce for several years now. I mean, wide receiver 11 and wide receiver 14 in PPR scoring over the past 2 seasons. And the guy just got a little bit unlucky last season. I think that's what it comes down to. Multiple scores were nullified by penalty. And you just look at all the guys that had at least 100 targets, and he was one of only 6 guys to score fewer than 4 touchdowns. So we have an instance of a very good player getting a bunch of opportunity and just not finding the end zone all that often. And, okay, maybe in a Jacksonville type offense where we have to worry about total points, we could be more concerned about this moving forward. But look at the way the Rams ended last season. I mean, after that bye, they went from the first team in the league in terms of just, using 3 wide receiver formations to 12th. Big drop off, and we saw that really impact Cooper Kupp, but not so much Robert Woods. The guy had 9 targets in each of the Rams' final 7 games. Even if you want to say that moving forward, they're going to have equal target share between Woods and Kupp, we have Woods as the one that's getting, 17 to 18 rush attempts per season. So I think it's a situation where we can project confidently close to 150 opportunities for Woods, and players of his caliber simply don't go this long without scoring touchdowns. And, I mentioned before, wide receiver 11, wide receiver 14, that's the range you should be treating him going into week 1. I have Woods as my wide receiver 12 this week, ahead of DJ Moore, Juju Smith-Schuster, DJ Chark. True ballers. I mean, there's a lot of great wide receivers in the league, but Robert Woods has earned the opportunity, and he has the positive regression moving forward to warrant every week wide receiver 1 treatment.
Yeah, I mean, the interesting thing with that is, the fewer wide receivers that are on the field, probably the worst for most wide receivers, but the Rams regard Robert Woods as their best player at the position. He blocks well. Obviously, he's their best route runner, and as you said, he runs with the football. Are you concerned at all with the emergence of Tyler Higbee, who, down the stretch a season ago, got a ton of targets from Jared Goff? Are you concerned at all that he's going to eat into any of Woods' opportunities?
So I think this offense is good enough to enable multiple fantasy relevant guys. I mean, even in their quote unquote down year last season, they were still a top 12 scoring offense. So Higbee and Woods were both balling out really during that stretch. Now it was Higbee just completely dominating his position, but Woods is really up there during that too. I think Cooper Kupp is the more concerning guy in the equation. I mean, for him to have those weird games at the end of last season, only 28% snaps against the Bears, 61% snap rates, and back-to-back games to end the year. He's the guy I've dropped a little bit more in my rankings. Great player, and hey, we see an average of 4.3 teammate wide receivers per year, each finish inside of the league's top 24 receivers. Kupp and Woods have done that in the past. They should be projecting to do it again, but I think we're going to see a larger disparity between Woods' finish and Kupp's finish in 2020.
Okay, sometimes there are players who just do so well that there's no reason to, assume that they're going to do similarly the following year. Last year, it was Patrick Mahomes. He still wins the Super Bowl MVP, but he statistically wasn't as good. Who is that player this year, Ian?
I think it's Lamar Jackson, and this is in no way, shape, or form hating on his ability as a passer. And part of what makes him so good as a passer is just his rushing ability, and teams have to defend him different, and that's not going anywhere. But just the sheer efficiency he had last year, particularly finding the end zone through the air, it's going to be really tough to replicate that. I mean, just historically, any quarterback that's posted a touchdown rate of even 7% or higher, we see that kind of come crashing back down to earth the following season. It's just hard to be that good through the air back-to-back seasons in a row. And, with Lamar hitting 9% last year, I think we're going to see that itch down closer to 5 or 6%. Now, the volume should go up. We can't just sit here and yell regression without, also considering that, hey, maybe because this player was so good, he'll get more volume next season. So I do think he'll have more passing attempts, but, would not be surprised if he's going to finish in that 20 to 25 range of passing touchdowns as opposed to the 35 he put up last year. The good news for Lamar is he's pretty much a fantasy football cheat code because of this rushing floor. I mean, number 5 in the league if we only count starts in terms of rushing yards per start over the past 2 seasons. And, it's a situation where if we're looking, obviously, if you have Lamar on your team in season-long leagues, that dude's never leading the starting lineup. But on DraftKings this week at 8,100, it's the highest price we've ever seen Lamar at in the regular season. Gets a Browns defense, though, that he's personally shredded 3 times now on the ground. And I think, there's definitely a case to be made that stacking Lamar with Hollywood Brown, with Mark Andrews, in this sneaky condensed passing game could be the way to go in tournament formats.
Yeah, as you said, I mean, his prop for rushing yards this year, 919.5. That's unheard of for a quarterback and just gives a floor that is unseen at the position. Thank you, Ian. We're going to move on to Cardinals-Niners next.
All right, it's finally time to discuss the game that I personally am most excited for, and that is Cardinals at 49ers. A lot of question marks here with both teams. The 49ers, can they rebound from the devastation of losing the Super Bowl? And the Cardinals are everyone's favorite team this season. So spread is 7. In your mind, is this too steep or is this the right number?
I think it's a little steep. The Cardinals have momentum heading into the season for a good reason. They added DeAndre Hopkins for just a second-round pick. We love their draft picks of Isaiah Simmons and Josh Jones, even if they may not be starting right out the gate. And then Kyler Murray flashed enough, and there's been that kind of year 2 jump for a lot of guys in recent years, Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson. Recent history says he's the next guy in line to do it. So I will say, I think 7 is a lot given the sort of trajectory of both teams this offseason.
Yeah, even though the Niners try to be a running team, like wide receiver is the second or third most important position in football, and they just struggle there, right? And that's really, it's going to be difficult for them to exploit what could be a weak Arizona Cardinals defense. Brandon Ayuk out, Deebo Samuel, iffy for this game. The Arizona Cardinals were really bad against tight ends a season ago, but they've gotten reinforcements in Isaiah Simmons, Devondre Campbell. You get Jordan Hicks for his second year with the team. So I think they just match up a lot better than they did a season ago. And then a season ago, they gave the Niners, 2 pretty good games.
I mean, they couldn't cover anybody in those games, and they have improved. Isaiah Simmons excites me here. I love the Cardinals getting 7 in this spot. I just think from a regression standpoint, especially on defense, we know that that's something that happens for football teams. And the 49ers, they struggled so much in coverage 2 years ago. They still have some question marks there. The second wide receiver, Richard Sherman, is amazing, but getting older. And now the Cardinals can take advantage of that. How big of a difference, especially for this team, does DeAndre Hopkins make?
I mean, it's enormous. And it's not just because DeAndre Hopkins is this great wide receiver. It's who you're going from. Keyshawn Johnson was playing X-wide receiver for them last year. On 256 passing snaps, he had 187 yards. Not even 1 yard per route run. That's disastrously low for anyone in the NFL, one of the worst figures in the league. So you go from a rookie 6th-round pick to a probably top 5 wide receiver in the NFL. They didn't have a guy that they knew could beat coverage one-on-one last year. Now they have that guy.
Yeah, and you have the intermediate part of the field. Like Murray was pretty good, in terms of generating big-time throws. He was decent at avoiding turnover-worthy plays, but where he really struggled was generating positively graded throws. He was one of the worst quarterbacks in the league at that a season ago. And that's, where do you get those? You get those in sort of like that Jameis Winston sort of area in the middle of the field. Now he's got a receiver that can occupy that, and I think that sort of completes their offense. It remains to be seen whether Murray can take advantage of it, but the opportunity is there for him.
Yeah, I mean, he didn't have any. He didn't have a single wide receiver earn a top 75 grade when lined up out wide. That's hard to do, and now he has one of the best. So it looks like all 3 of us are fading the Niners, which I love. It's exactly the spot I want to be in. Okay, next up, Vikings and Packers. You 2 guys duking it out here. This one is being played in Minnesota, usually a good home field advantage. No fan's going to be there. This has moved all the way past through 3, and now it's 2.5. Vikings are favored. Mike, I have a feeling I know how you feel. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think we're going to see a lot of the same we saw last season, and it's the fact that the Vikings' interior offensive line does not match up well against the Packers' interior defensive line. They had no answer for Kenny Clark last year, and they only probably maybe got worse on the interior. They lost their best pass protector in Josh Klein. They go from him to Dakota Dozier. Their 3 interior left guard, center, right guard, all earned pass blocking grades under 50 last season. Now, Garrett Bradbury is probably going to get better in year 2, but he never projected as a great pass blocker. So having them block Kenny Clark and now the Packers plan on playing Zadarius Smith more inside, that's just going to be a nightmare for the Minnesota Vikings offense.
Yeah, this number just lacks face validity. I mean, even with the home field advantage being what it is, you're basically saying that the Vikings are slightly better than Green Bay on a neutral field, which I reject, especially given how you talked about, Mike, matchups. The Packers have like 2 or 3 more good defensive backs than the Vikings have good receivers. Mm-hmm. And that's like the most important place in the football field. So short of a Dalvin Cook rushing for 200 yards, and he brought them back a season ago with a 75-yard run, I just don't see how Minnesota moves the ball effectively enough. And then on defense, no Donnell Hunter, right? Yeah. 3 corners that they have to replace. No interior pass rush. And the guy that they got from Jacksonville, Yannick Ngakoue, just kind of an average pass rusher after you shake it all out, on the play-by-play level. I just don't see Green Bay losing this football game.
And he's going up against David Bakhtiari. It's not like a lot of guys get the better of him. Yeah.
It sounds like Kirk Cousins' quote was apt, in your opinion. To me, the biggest mismatch is Davante Adams against what, to me, is the biggest weakness for the Minnesota Vikings. They can't cover anybody. Huge question mark on the outside at corner, and no one separates better than Davante Adams. Only 33 contested catches for Davante Adams, or contested targets, I should say, the second fewest of any wide receiver. Tyreek Hill, the only guy ahead of him. So I foresee that matchup working in the favor of the Packers, and I agree. I just don't see them losing this game. So I like it as a teaser leg. We like it as a teaser leg, and you should too. All right, if you're playing DFS, you're not trying to do decently well. You're trying to win it all. That's the only reason
you're not first, you're last.
True. So you are looking for wide receivers that have the chance to, quote unquote, blow up. And so what we're doing is we're trying to predict the receiver's chance of scoring 25 or more points. And on this list, a few names that I am used to seeing. We'll start with Julio Jones, who, not surprisingly, you're paying a lot, but not surprisingly has a chance to go big.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing with him. You have an 18% chance to get 25 or more points, and he's going to be so highly owned that you're going to want to have him on your roster if he does blow up, because if he does and everybody else has him and you don't, you have no chance of winning.
Yeah, and they're playing the Seahawks. Now, I know the Seahawks, they got Jamal Adams, but they were not as good of a defense last year as maybe people like to think. So that matchup at home, favorable. Kenny Golladay, Babytron, 13% chance of scoring over 25. We've talked a lot about this guy in the offseason, the most valuable wide receiver in the NFC North last year.
And he costs about $1,500 less on DraftKings than does Julio Jones, but you still get that upside there against a Bears defense that's starting a rookie at corner. Mm-hmm. Matthew Stafford loves going downfield. And Galladay's been one of the best young receivers in the league, 2 1,000-yard years before his rookie contract is over.
Yeah, tied for the league lead in deep passes, deep catches last year. And Matt Stafford, man, people forgot how great he was when he was healthy. Next up, Robbie Anderson in a new place in Carolina. They're playing the Raiders. And I don't know if you know this, but the Raiders literally haven't covered anyone in like 5 years.
Yeah, not only that, but the Panthers aren't going to cover anybody this year. This game's going to have a lot of scoring. And, I know Teddy Bridgewater struggles a little bit throwing the ball down the field, but Anderson is his only real deep threat. And I think, at his price, the 7% chance that he gets over 25 points, I think is worth at least the gamble, as a low price option.
Only takes one.
Only takes one.
Raiders were dead last in the league in EPA allowed per pass play last year. Now, if you are trying, you want to be the guy that's savvy, picks the low price dude that just goes off.
Yep.
And Irv Smith in Minnesota, I don't know if you know this, but Stephon Diggs no longer there. They need playmakers.
Yeah, and they're going to play a lot of 2 tight end sets because they don't have any good wide receivers. So in a game where we think that the Packers are going to handle the Vikings pretty well, Kirk Cousins does a really good job throwing the ball out of play action. Irv Smith, is the explosive tight end in that group. He's only $3,100 on DraftKings. That's your option, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I thought you were going to say that Kirk Cousins was going to do some other things, but that's neither here nor there. We'll be right back with a little bit of Showdown, if that's more your thing. With all the island games, if you're not playing Showdown in DFS, I honestly just don't know what you're doing, and the man to help me with that is Kevin Cole, because he spends more time than you do, for sure, preparing to optimize your Showdown lineups. That means picking the right captain, because that guy is worth 1.5 times his point total. So Kevin, captain, my captain, help me out here. Who am I putting in that captain slot?
Yeah, we ran a ton of simulations for this, finding the most similar matchups to this Texans-Chief matchup, going ahead and finding out millions of different combinations and how often we found someone to be in that optimal roster. It should come as no surprise that we see Patrick Mahomes at the top, followed by Deshaun Watson, the two quarterbacks. Then we have some of the pass catchers here. We have Travis Kelce and Tyreek Hill. And lastly, for our fifth option, as far as the top optimal allocations, it is Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Now, the key when you're viewing these, though, is not to look at them in a vacuum. You have to think, how are they going to be owned in order to win these tournaments? And among these five options, Travis Kelce is the guy that we only see owned at a little bit under 10%, which is going to give him some leverage. And we feel like the rest of these options are really going to be very popular picks amongst the crowd. So we would probably fade the rest of the top options.
Yeah, do you think this is, I'm curious because it feels as though everyone, they look at the spread, the Chiefs are so popular given what they did to the Texans being, one of the teams that they demolished in the playoffs, that maybe the Texans players will be underutilized here, or do you still think Deshaun Watson is going to show up in a ton of captain slots?
I mean, I think Deshaun Watson is going to show up high. And when you look at it from a macro perspective, quarterbacks are normally not the best captain selections. They're great in the flex spot, but you really want to blow up players. So often that's a receiver. And if you are going to choose someone on the Texans, I would say Brandon Cooks is a great selection. Of course, you have to check the injury report and make sure he's actually going to be playing tonight. But I think even without the injury concerns, he was going to be lower owned than someone like Will Fuller. But yet this is a new receiving core. We don't know who's going to be the blow up player here. He has almost an equal ceiling to Fuller, but we see him as being about half his own. So he could be that option if you want to grab someone on the Texans in an outcome that people are not expecting.
Yeah, going with the Travis Kelce move, which I like quite a bit, and the main reason is that the Texans can't cover anybody. They can't cover receivers. They can't cover tight ends. It doesn't matter. They can't cover you or me. So Travis Kelce, a guy that Mahomes loves and that you should love in your captain slot as well. Okay, I've got my captain locked down. I'm trying to put together the lineup that's going to be a little unique, that's going to get me across the finish line. Who's a player or maybe a stack that I wouldn't be thinking of that I should be?
Yeah, I think the key here is you want to be bold. You want to choose something that other people are not going to duplicate because you're going to be splitting up that prize money. So if you are going to go with someone like Kelce, that's going to be a popular option. So how can you diversify there? Well, I would say go deep on Chiefs. So you probably want to go 5-1. You want to go 5 different Chiefs players. And I think a good combination that not a lot of people are going to be using is to combine Clyde Edwards-Helaire with Darrell Williams.
Wow.
Now, we don't know how that backfield is going to split out. But if, a lot of people are going to say, well, you don't want to pick one or the other because you're not going to get those high-end outcomes. That may be true at the captain slot, but in the flex position, if Williams could get the goal line work, could get some touchdowns, Edwards-Helaire could get the receiving work, you could find both of those guys in your flex spots for an optimal lineup. Not that many people will have that, and that'll give you a better chance of getting a bigger slice of the prize pool.
Yeah, the Chiefs laid a 50 burger on the Texans. I don't see a whole ton of reasons why that isn't possible again, so there should be plenty to spread around. We spent about 4 minutes on it. I learned a ton. You probably did, but you also dig way into the weeds here and explain all the methodology on PFF.com. Your Showdown article is appointment reading, so everyone should go check it out. Plus, you have a new podcast, Unexpected Points, with Kevin Cole doing all the stuff that you need to help you win some money this weekend. We are heading now to the last game of the slate. Tampa Bay and New Orleans. We started off with the young studs, Watson and Mahomes, and now it's time for the old geezers, Brady and Breeze. It's going to be in an empty Mercedes-Benz Stadium. Breeze and the Saints are favored by 3.5. And I struggle with this one because I'm taking Tom Brady this year to be the better quarterback. But in this game, I just don't know if I can get all the way on board with believing that the Bucs come together right off of the jump. So, Mike, your thoughts?
Yeah, there's good reason for that, and it's because it can't be understated how different Bruce Arians' offense is from what New England ran with Tom Brady basically his entire career. Last season, Tom Brady's average depth of target only 8 yards downfield. You go back to 2015 when Carson Palmer had that near MVP season, it was 11.3 yards his average depth of target. Over 3 yards on completely opposite ends of the spectrum in terms of what he's asked to do. So with only an abbreviated offseason, only a handful of weeks with no preseason games, I just think it could be a little too different for him right out the gate to go up against the Saints defense that's loaded on every level.
Yeah, and starting this week, Mike Evans has a hamstring injury. Chris Godwin. The Saints defensive backs are pretty good. It's going to be a matchup like with Demario Davis and Malcolm Jenkins against those tight ends and Gronk and OJ Howard. And I think the Saints could probably mitigate those things, leaving Brady to probably wait until a month from now before we really see him hit his stride.
Yeah, plus you've got Emmanuel Sanders now in New Orleans. They haven't had a number 2 guy worth mentioning for so long. Sanders, we saw what he did for the Niners offense last year. My gut says, you know what, 3.5, you feel uneasy about it, therefore you should take the Saints. But there's just no way that I can see Tom Brady with the massive chip on his shoulder coming out and getting, anything other than losing in a very close game down to the wires. For that reason, I'm laying off of it. Do either of you have the stones to bet either side?
I can't. To me, this is like, who is it, Darren Rovell, who says he doesn't do a March Madness bracket.
Says a lot of
he just
things,
roots
to be
for
honest.
madness. I can't pick this game because I just want to root for greatness. These 2 Hall of Fame quarterbacks, I want them to play at the top of their games. I just want to see what that looks like.
Yeah, this is a game for learning, right? You learn what these teams are about with the Saints as far as the superstars, how do they gel, and Tampa Bay, are they going to improve with a new quarterback and an improving defense as well? I'm just going to lay off this as well.
Just what the people want to hear. Don't bet the game. All right, so we're going to close it out with this. Give me one more spread pick that you would bet on this week. We'll start with Mike.
I'm going to go with the Colts, laying 8 points to the Jags in Jacksonville. The Jags just got nothing. I mean, they have no reason for hope this season on the defensive side of the ball. The defensive line is just going to get rolled by that Colts offensive line. I don't see how that one stays close.
If you can get 8, I like Cleveland in Baltimore this week. No, lack of home field advantage. Cleveland improving, I think, tremendously from Freddie Kitchens. I'm going to go with Cleveland.
Tremendously is an understatement there. You see that field? That's the hollowed ground upon which Joe Burrow has been preparing to beat the Los Angeles Chargers. They're getting 3 points at home. I am all in on Joe Burrow being really good right from the start. Okay, next, a long shot that you would pick to win if you had to.
I kind of touched on this earlier. I think the Arizona Cardinals beat the San Francisco 49ers. There's a lot of reasons for hope for them heading into this year 2 for Kyler Murray. And I don't think it can be understated how much DeAndre Hopkins makes that offense a different team.
Familiarity is a thing in the NFL, and even though I don't think the Jets are a good long-term proposition, I think week 1, 6.5-point underdogs in Buffalo. I like the Jets.
Okay, you talked about the Browns. Huge change from Freddie Kitchens to Kevin Stefanski. They've played the Baltimore Ravens really tough. I can't see them winning this game, and for that reason, they're my long shot that I would take to potentially win. I'm going a little reverse psychology. Okay, survivor pick, team that you think has a great shot to make sure that you're not crying and out of your survivor pool after week 1.
Yeah, I just touched on it. The Colts. I just do not see how they lose to the Jacksonville Jaguars. They got big problems if they lose to the Jaguars this week. I think that one's the easiest lock of the week.
Yeah, that one has the most future value as well because Indianapolis is in sort of a tough division, and they're the biggest favorite of the week, other than Kansas City. But Kansas City is going to be a favorite a number of times the rest of the year, so I'm going to go also with the Colts, even though they're on the road in Jacksonville. It's not too big of a task.
When I looked at this slate and I had to pick the Colts, like you guys, it made me realize that there's a lot that we don't know about this NFL season, and it's going to be awesome for that reason. We'll be here with you again on Sunday, and then from this point forward, Thursdays and Sundays for you to get betting and fantasy advice. And of course, head to pff.com to get everything else that you could possibly need. Thank you for being with us, and let's go have some fun.